Good morning, C3, and thank you for allowing me to be with you this morning. My name is Reverend Christopher Rowe. I am the executive minister down here at Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids, and on behalf of everyone who calls this church their spiritual home, I wanted to send their best and their holiday greetings to all of you out on the lakeshore. I am an ordained Christian minister, though I function really as a non theist, and I suspect that many of my own idiosyncrasies and intersectionalities might actually overlap with some of yours. And so I'm humbled and honored to be with you this morning, and I want you to know how much I've always appreciated your own presence out on the lakeshore. Here we are. It is the eve of Christmas. It feels mere days away from the holiday itself, and the season of Advent has all but wound down. Advent is this deep season of reflection and anticipation and waiting and personal growth, and even in these darkening days of December. Advent and the ancient wisdom that comes from it reminds us that darkness is not necessarily an ending, but often an invitation into a new beginning. And so it makes sense that in many Christian traditions, on this fourth Sunday of Advent, they hear the same stories retold in the ancient liturgies. And part of the story is one you might all know. It involves an angel. His name is Gabriel. Maybe you've heard of him. And Gabriel goes and he decides he's going to visit this young virgin woman named Mary. Perhaps you've heard of her too. And he goes there. He interrupts her life and her way of being, and he says, "Whoa, don't freak out, but I've got news for you. You see, God loves you so much that you are going to have a baby. Don't ask where it's coming from, but you're having a baby. And that baby is actually going to be a baby you named Jesus. And one more thing, your Jesus baby will also be Lord Most High, to be exact. Oh, and one other tiny little thing. His kingdom will have no end, and he's basically God, or at least God's son. Bye-bye." For many of us, this story is as timeless and familiar as it is preposterous and discrediting of the entire biblical narrative. It's ridiculous. Well, the twisted tale doesn't end there, because there's this other little tiny piece I left off. You see, Gabriel also told Mary that her old, and I mean old, cousin Elizabeth was also going to have a baby. Even though she was, as the ancient writers described her, barren. So you flash forward a little bit, and Mary's talking to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, of course, is like, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant." And this light bulb goes off in Mary's head when she's reminded of what Gabriel had said to her about her cousin. And this is how she responds. "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely, from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promises he made to our ancestors, to Abraham, and to his descendants forever." In some Christian circles, Mary's words are simply called the Magnificat, and maybe you've heard of that. In other circles, Mary's song. And in other circles, it's called the Canticle of the Turning. The Canticle of the Turning, because in Mary's heart, and in the deepest parts of her being, she knew that the world was about to turn. You know, it's so easy, for myself included, to pass off these ancient stories as folklore and myth without thinking about their relevance today. And who could blame us? In a contemporary reality where the biblical stories have been used more often to harm than to help, it's just easier to write them off. And yet, There are these moments where the ancient myths, ones like the story of Mary, have contemporary truths that we just might need to hear, even in today's woke world. And this year, on this very morning, as we wind down from this unthinkable year, I think it's Mary, this young virgin mom who responds to her fate with joy, that has something to teach us all about courage. Look, I'm not here to debate the validity of this story, much less some of the questionable moral motifs that it stirs up. But who among us is not the least bit curious and intrigued by how Mary chose to respond? In a moment that would have terrified any number of us, the mythical Mary chose this posture of joy over fear. When presented with unthinkable and unimaginable uncertainties, she bursts into praise, for as she puts it, the world's about to turn. In many ways, Mary's response, or the Canticle of the Turning, is really a radical social justice manifesto, in which we might say that she preaches the first sermon, even longer, or earlier rather, than her own son's ministry. She takes us to church at a time when we might otherwise think it was unthinkable for a woman to do so. Mary, in her joy, calls out the injustices of her time, prophetically naming the power imbalances in her world and the ways in which change was coming, and the ways in which there would be real, tangible, and lasting change in the world. A new order. A posture of joy like this takes a hell of a lot of courage. Centuries of patriarchy and scores of redactions have bastardized this story, and in their wake, they have left us with this contemporary image of a Mary in which we pray, "Hail, Mother Mary, meek and mild." But this is inauthentic to the experience of the original authors and audiences, for whom Mary was a heroine of Israel and a revolutionist for change. She was bold, she was gritty, she was self-determined, and she was courageous. And if you were to dig deep into the cultural contexts and subtext, even of the angel Gabriel, you would come to find that Gabriel was often associated with war, metal, and metalworkers for that first century audience. The angel of war and grit came to Mary, not meek and mild, but strong and courageous, to draw first century audiences to see Mary clearly established as a revolutionary hero in this otherwise patriarchal, nationalistic, and violent world. And this famous Magnificat, this Canticle of the Turning, this awareness of fierce and radical and revolutionary change is the direct result of Mary's own joy and courage as she sees her place at the center of this remarkable turning. But Mary wasn't just singing her song against the realities of her time, but also for a better world, for the economically disadvantaged and the socially outcast. Elizabeth Johnson notes that the battered woman, the single parent without resources, those without food at the table or without a table at all, the homeless family, the young abandoned to their own devices, and those who are discarded, all are encompassed in the hope that Mary courageously proclaims. The tradition of liberation theology reminds us that it's not simply about what God's people are liberated out of, but also what they are being liberated into that is our focus. And this is precisely Mary's own posture, and likely why she saw such joy in the ancient good news. You know, if you or I were to meet Mary today in 21st century America, she might be a 14-year-old black girl simply trying to get by in a gentrifying part of southeastern Grand Rapids, where to this day, water is delivered to those homes in lead pipes, something that is detrimental to the healthy development of a young fetus. Or, perhaps, She would be a young Latinx immigrant simply trying to exist in the Black Hills neighborhood of Grand Rapids' own West Side, where access to safe and secure medical care is not necessarily a given for non-English speaking residents who may also fear other consequences to exposing their presence in our community. Yet another concern for prenatal care. Or perhaps they might be a non binary adolescent simply trying to survive in any number of suffocatingly toxic, conservative white suburbs across West Michigan, where they feel light years away from adequate sexuality education and mental health and emotional resources. And perhaps her song in the 21st century, her song of joy, her song of courage, her canticle of the turning, might sound something like this. I can't believe my excitement about this. Out of all people, it was me, a poor, pregnant teenager, who was chosen. Everyone will call me blessed from now on. God's love is so much greater than I can even imagine. God showed their love for everyone, even those that society hates and despises. The LGBTQIA community, immigrants, refugees, the addicted and shamed. God knows that Black lives matter. Refugees and immigrants are all beloved. All the people who are seen as less than human are known and loved by God. God lifts up those who are preyed upon by corrupt politicians. The hungry, the ones brutalized by the police and ICE, and families without health care. God invites each of us to the table to speak and tell our story, to be heard and to be known in this world. The power-hungry perpetrators who care only about their agendas don't have the last word anymore. I can sense God's presence holding me and all of creation close, faithfully liberating us, just as the stories promised. The world is about to change, and I am going to be part of it. These young Marys, these Marys that exist in our very midst across our urban, suburban, and rural landscapes, experience and demonstrate profound levels of courage simply because of their mere existence in a culture and a nation that has been set up to work against them. And it is their response to a turning world. It is their response to a better world. It is their response to a more inclusive and just world with joy, that should compel us all this morning and teach us something about courage. And so here we are on what feels like the eve of Christmas, being invited to see change like Mary did and the Marys among us do, with joy and courage. Change comes whether we want it to or not, and it can be a really scary thing. And you and I can choose to respond to it and to react to it in an infinite host of ways. And you and I are no strangers to change, especially at this moment in time. If we were to give 2020 a tagline or a mantra, we could just call it 2020, the year of change, or 2020, the year of changing expectations. And it's not like I need to break down every twist and turn over the last year, or turn of events, or current events, to demonstrate how we have learned to coexist and manage change together. But how many of us actually glean joy from change? How many of us have reacted to the daily blast of unexpected changes with the kind of joy that Mary exhibits? And I'm not talking about changing the furniture around in our homes to accommodate a COVID-friendly home office for a year, or even changing Thanksgiving and Christmas plans to accommodate health guidelines, but change that's systemic and institutional. The kind of change that's more than disrupting our lives for a year or so, or however long a pandemic takes, but the kind of change that invites us to see the world as Mary saw it, with courage and joy. A world that's rooted in justice, and a subverted version of reality in which all might be able to live in mutually beneficial shalom. There's a scene in the newer Mary Poppins movie, though I don't think it's all that new now, that revolves entirely around a world gone turtle. Yeah, turtle. It's about the world when it goes turtle. If you haven't seen the movie, I might recommend it. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible. And obviously, I'm getting spiritual truths from Mary Poppins. So if you haven't seen it, let me explain the scene a bit. There's this scene that takes place in which Mary Poppins and her band of whoever's with her go inside the flat of a woman. And they get there, and this woman's life has been completely turned turtle, which I assume is a reference to a turtle stuck on its back. The woman's life has been turned upside down, literally. Everything's upside down. The furniture's on the ceiling is the floor is the ceiling. Everything is upside down, and she is terrified to come out from underneath of an object for fear of being hurt or getting lost in this new world. And, of course, with typical Mary Poppins elegance, she offers the woman a bit of advice, and she says, "You see, when the world turns right upside down, the best thing to do is turn right along with it. When you change the view from where you stood, the things you view will change for good." When you change the view from where you stood, the things you view will change for good. And so, of course, the woman, naturally relieved by the pastoral presence of Mary Poppins, takes a top hat and uses its flat surface on its head, ultimately changing the ways in which she sees the world. She turns herself with it, and she allows the top hat to be that tool to see the world from a new perspective. And of course, with a new perspective and new eyes to see her world, the woman sees a new place for herself in that world gone turtle, and she finds joy in it. She finds joy in it. But to reach out and take that flat top hat, to hear those words of Mary Poppins, to seek joy takes courage. And this is easier said than done. Because to face your fear and approach your anxieties takes courage. To shift your worldview and flip your paradigm takes courage. To respond to adversity with joy rather than judgment, that takes courage. I'm reminded of a quote from Elaine Smukler who says, "Change comes whether we want it to or not. If we can stay open and curious to an ever-changing landscape of life's possibilities, change can actually be the key to resilience." By learning to explore what life presents to us, we ride the waves of change rather than losing ourselves in the undertow. By learning to explore what presents to us, we ride the waves of change rather than losing ourselves in the undertow. Again, that's from Elaine Smukler. Change comes whether we want it or not. Staying open and staying curious requires vulnerability, and that takes courage. But so does finding joy. And so I suspect that the key difference between our choice to ride the waves of change or being caught in the undertow is our own willingness to live with that kind of courage. Courage that's open and curious and vulnerable. I think that one of the ways in which we choose courage to ride the waves of change rather than losing ourselves in its undertow is when we heed that sacred wisdom of Mary Poppins and we willingly and we willfully turn our own worldviews right along with the changing world rather than being trapped on our heads upside down and in the undertow. A world gone turtle and the inevitable waves of change are invitations to us this morning, and so is the witness of the Virgin Mary and all those Marys among us. You and I And our communities are presented with opportunities to respond to change and personal growth day after day after day, and with immense vulnerability and courage. Some of it good, some of it's not so good, but all of it is an invitation to live with courage and vulnerability and resilience. And this year, mere days away from Christmas and on the eve of a long, long year, we are being invited to think more deeply and with more self criticism and with more self awareness and with courage to think about the ways in which we can encounter change and how we're going to choose to respond to it. Yes, my friends. Yes, you skeptics. And yes, to us secularists alike. If there were to be any ancient truths that I believe are being called out to us this Christmas, I would argue that it is the invitation of a young virgin mother calling to us to meet change with joy and courage, calling for us to rise above the waves of change and not to get trapped in the undertow of fear, and instead rise up and turn our expectations and our paradigms on their heads in ways that inspire us to live into a more full, whole, and just future with one another, just like the future that Mary first saw. The Christmas story is bigger than an illustration on a Christmas card. And it's more profound than a pageant or a TV special or even a nativity scene on a church lawn. The Christmas story is a harrowing story of immense resilience and liberation. And Mary's song is a revolutionary rallying cry that still steers us towards a revolution that's unfolding in our time. If we let it. And that way of being, that posture, that willingness to surrender some of our privilege and offer our vulnerability takes a hell of a lot of courage. But how joyful it is to live in that kind of world. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and may it be so.